Alright then, so we're going to do some eyes today in this video, and then we're going to do another video for lips. So we're going to go over the same process I did in class. Now, if you've been watching the videos I've been putting up, which I hope you all have been doing, you would have seen that in all of them so far, I've been sculpting the eyes from the actual main head, which is perfectly fine to do. But go for it. This is just another way of making eyes. It's more technical because there's more steps involved, but it is more controllable because you're not dedicating geometry with to the main piece of geometry, to the main head, so early on. So either way is perfectly fine. Again, this is just another way of creating eyes. Now, the one thing I do want us to think about as well is actually, again, observing, because again, we're not doing enough of this, is I really want us to observe the eyes. So in my pure F here, I've got Veronica. I'm going to use her eyes, because out of the packs that we've got, she's got the most the best eyes for what I want to achieve for this. Sakaz is a little bit. She's always looking up or away from the camera, so it's about to judge her eyes. This one I get in a good shape of the eyes, but I want to really pay attention to the actual shape of the eyes. And remember, you've got that dominant upper eyelid and then that subdominant lower eyelid. That's never going to change. The upper eyelid is always going to be on top of the lower eyelid on the outside. So when I do come to sculpt the eyes later on, I'm going to remember to not have both the upper and lower eyelid join in the exact same place. I've got to make sure that one fits on top of the other. That we have obviously the tear duct section here. I've got to observe the tear duct and all the information that's inside there, and then think about that shape we were talking about the outside of the eyelid here, or the outside of the eye socket, being a convex shape. So this area actually comes out and sweeps outwards for the most part. As it comes to the inside of the eye here, this is a concave shape here. So remember, we're talking about that twisted piece of tape. Okay, so I really want to pay attention to that. I'm also going to pay attention to what's going on underneath, and this is why we need good reference. Heavily photoshopped reference often covers up any blemishes or any obvious distinctions between the lower eyelid and the lower part of the orbital socket. We want to make sure that we can actually see that kind of stuff, and I'm just trying to make sure that it all looks okay. And what stuff I'm seeing as well through people posting up on the Discord in the feedback is that people aren't necessarily observing the shape properly. They're getting the shape in there, but they're almost like overblowing it. They're almost overdoing it. So much of the shape of the face is all about subtlety. And one thing that we do not have in the face, especially in the eyes, just in the eyes, is we don't have any wonky shapes, no jaggedy shapes. These are very smooth shapes because they're getting pulled over what is compared to the eyelid. The eyeball is a hard shape. So when the eyelids actually get pulled around the eye, they conform to that shape. There should be no kind of wobbly, bumpy, jaggedy edges. Yes, there might be sweeps. I can see here Veronica's eye slightly dips down on the outside here, slightly. And on the inside here, there's an ever so slight bump there. But really, these are smooth shapes, and I've got to try and figure out the shapes. Now again, you can take this to Photoshop, and I would advise doing this, doing a smooth draw over, and then maybe breaking it up into straight lines. So if you could make the upper eyelid up into 3 or 4 straight lines, what would those straight lines be? What would be the graphical shape? Thinking about that Asaro head, what would be the graphical shape of the eye? So if I was to do that, what shapes would I achieve? Especially and also for the lower eyelid as well. Because just want to make sure that we're not just looking at something and going, okay, I understand what it looks like, and not paying attention. Because that's one thing I'm really seeing being neglected all the time at the minute, is we're not observing our reference. Now again, I'm not saying about observation as in we want to make it pin perfect, but I'm talking about observation as in we're just neglecting our basic shapes, like our measuring, the landmarks of the skull, how far one feature is from another. Basic soft shapes. These are all being ignored at the minute. We're not doing likenesses, so don't try and do a likeness. Just try and use our reference as a guide. Okay, if you can get it looking like that person, super awesome. But really, we want to make something that's approximate of what we're looking at, and we just want to make sure it's believable and smooth. We want to get those forms in there before we start even trying to think about likenesses. Okay, so I'm going to do this by mouse for the most part for this at the beginning. So I've got my head here, minus the mouth, minus the lip, the eyes, like that. But I've got my indications of my orbital sockets here. Now I could make those a little bit deeper if I want to, but another thing I'm seeing a lot of people do is make these really deep, the eye sockets. I'm seeing people make them really deep, and really, really round. Don't do that. Again, another thing I cannot stress enough, don't do that. We just need indications of where these shapes are, because we can form all that shape later on. But if we make the shapes really round and really deep, then we're having to work really hard to get those shapes back. So all I want us to do is, again, look at our reference. You know, try and, if we were almost like smooth and blur out the eye so there's nothing left, what would the shape be? Where's the shape of the orbital socket in the eyelid? Exactly what I'm looking at here. Okay? Right. So first of all, I want to bring in my eyes. Now you could bring in an individual eye, and place it in and try and guesstimate where it is. And totally, if you want to do that, you can do, but be prepared to do a little bit of fixing later on. What I'm going to do is make sure that I've got a pretty good spread of eyes. I've got a pretty good idea about how big and the right position of my eyes. And all I've got to do is just add that new subtool in. So in my subtool menu on the right hand side, I'm going to come to Insert. I'm going to come to Sphere. I'm going to add that in. That's that. And I'm just going to move it forward a little bit. And I'm just going to scale it down a little bit, just so it's a bit easy to work with at first. And then I'm going to duplicate this off twice to the left. And how I do that very quickly is by holding Control and then dragging off. And it'll leave behind a masked version of this. Another thing I'm seeing people forgetting what to do. If this surface is dark like this, it just means it's been masked. That's all. So I'm going to do that once, and I'm going to do that twice, like that. And then I'm going to clear that mask. So these are now active. Now what I've done here is I've made the middle eye position, and then my eye, and then the outside eye. Because again, we want to make sure this is 5 eyes wide. Now all I've got to do now is make sure my pivot point is in the middle of my eye. So all I'm going to do is hold Control and click on this little pin. Sorry, click on the little home icon, not the pin at all. Click on the little home. There you go. So that puts it in the middle. It's not in the middle of the ball, it's in the middle of the world, but from the front it's in the middle of the ball. That's what we want. And then all I'm going to do is come down to Geometry, Modify Topology, Mirror and Weld, like that. So if I go and do that whole process all over again, so I've brought in my sphere, I've moved it forward, I've gone to Subtool, Insert, brought in a sphere, just scale it down a little bit so it's a bit easy to work with. Hold Control and I can drag off to the left. This will be my actual eyeball, and I'm going to drag off to the left again. This eyeball is going to basically be the very extent of where my eye area is going to be. And then I'm going to clear that mask by holding Control and dragging a box. And then I've got to move this pivot point back to the middle of the object. So I'm going to hold Alt, click the little home icon, like that. And then I'm just going to go to Geometry, Mirror and Weld, right, Modify Topology, Mirror and Weld. There we go. Cool. And now I can scale that down. And what I'm going to do is just scale that down so that the outside spheres are just on the edge of my temple. I'll bring the whole spheres forward like that. There we go. So about there. About there. Okay. Maybe a bit bigger, like that. Okay. So roughly about 5 eyes wide, like that. That's looking good. Cool. So obviously I want to get rid of 3 of those eyes. The middle, the left, and right eye. So what I'm going to do is just go back to my subtool. I'm just going to split these apart. So split 2 parts. Yep. And then let's go through the different subtools. And then delete the ones I don't want. So this is obviously my middle eye. I don't want that one. I can delete that. This one's my far right eye. I don't want that one. This one's my right eye. I do want that one. This one's my far left eye. Don't want that one. That's my left eye. Cool. So I should be left with 2 eyes now. So I'm just going to merge this one down. There we go. So now my eyes are there. Now all I've got to do now is just make sure that I hold Alt and click the little Google pin location thing. So not the actual thumbtack pin, this little pin. The go to unmasked mesh center. There we go. That means it's just in the middle. And then I'm just going to make sure that they are positioned correctly. Now remember, this is a new subtool, so it does need the symmetry turned back on, so I'll just press X then. And I'm just going to move this into place. Now remember in class we were talking about, we roughly guide this by looking at the top of the eye socket and then tracing a line down to the cheekbone, and the eye should somewhat run up against that. But I find that puts a little bit too much. It puts it too far forward, makes it too buggy. So I'm going to move it back a little bit, something like that. Now don't worry about. A lot of people were saying as well, like, oh, it looks like my eyes too far apart. Don't worry about that. We've just not worked on this area. Okay. This is why we've got to move around and. Oops, daisy. We've got to move around our mesh. Okay. Because that's looking fine for now. If I need to adjust anything, it'll become very apparent early on when I need to adjust anything. Cool. Now, just for ease later on, if I do need to adjust anything, I'm just going to hold Alt and drag this slightly out to the left like that. So that means that with symmetry turned on, if I move one of these to the right or left, it's going to move it to the right and left on the other one as well. So if I turn on transparency, that's where my eyes are. And I want you to really pay attention to what we're not seeing of the eye and to what we are seeing of the eye. So that's why it looks like the eyes are too far apart, because half of it is hidden inside the face there, because we've not worked on this area. Cool. Right then. So what I'm going to do is, with my mask tool, make sure I've got my symmetry turned on. With my mask tool, I'm just going to draw a line. If I just, there you go. I'm just going to draw a masking box over half of my object, like that. And then I'm going to extract. So I've got subtool, extract. Oh, actually, for I'm going to move my camera just underneath, because I want to see the thickness of these. And again, what I'm looking for is the thickness of, a rough thickness of my subject's eyelids, as you can see around there. So what I'm going to do is click extract. Okay, looking at that, looking at my reference, I think that's a bit too thick. So when I come to thickness down here, what I'm going to do is just go to 0.015. Right, I'll do that again. 0.015. There we go. And then I extract again. Okay, it looks a little bit better that now. So now I can. Oh, I'm just going to turn off double as well. I'm going to turn off double. I can add that. To be honest, it doesn't really matter on this. In this occasion, double doesn't really matter if it's turned on. What's going to happen is it's going to make a shape with the thickness on the outside and then on the inside as well. So our eyelids are going to be twice as thick as they look, but it'll save us from some stuff. So don't worry about it. For now. So yeah, I'm going to click extract. That looks okay. Click accept. Now we get a new subtool. And again, one thing people were complaining about is, oh, it looks broken. You know, it doesn't look. Things look like there's two objects. It's not. People are just forgetting that this is masked. So we have to unmask it. And then we're fine. Okay, so now with those made, just make sure your pivot point's in the right position. When I'm saying right position, it's in the middle of the shape like this. And then I can just rotate that backwards to open my upper eyelid. Something like that. And then I go back to my original eye, and then I just flip the subtool, flip the mask, and then I extract again, accept again, clear that, yeah, so put that there, clear the mask, and then just rotate that around. So that's my lower eyelid. That's as simple as it has to be. So I'll do that all over again just to show you how simple the whole thing is. So delete both the eyes. So I take the eyes that are there. I cut them in half. Well, not cut them in half, sorry, mask them in half. I extract. Now I've made my thickness 0.015. So I extract that. Check how thick they are. Does it look okay with my subject? If yes, then click accept. My new subtool is now there, so I just clear that mask. Move the pivot point by holding Alt. I'll just hold move the pivot point so it's there in the middle, basically where the eyes rotate from. And then I can rotate them up to where I want my upper eyelids to be. And then I go back to my eyes again, flip that mask by holding Control, click in grey space, extract again, accept again, clear that mask again, move the pivot point to the middle again, and then rotate down to make my lower eyelid. Remembering that my lower eyelid doesn't really move that much and it's quite a lazy shape. So it's not going to be very high most of the time. It's going to be somewhere around there. Cool. And now from here, this is where I can start to shape my eyes. Number one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking about bringing in, this is where I actually bring in my Get close to my tablet and stuff, so I'll move my iPad. You get out of the way. Right down. So this is where I start to then sculpt stuff out. So what I'm going to do is start thinking about that shape we were talking about. So you've got that concave shape on the outside of the eye there. Convex shape, sorry. So you've got convex shape there. That's all the fat and tissue and the mass around the outside of the eye. And then you've got convex shape on the inside here, where your tear ducts are, where the glasses sit on your eyelids and stuff. So by doing this, what I'm doing is actually exposing the information that I want. And again, what I'm doing is looking at my reference, looking from 3/4, always move around, looking from the top, looking from the bottom. Again, stuff I'm not seeing people doing a lot, looking around the mesh. I'm just sculpting in that information. You don't have to be perfect at first, obviously, because as we work on it more, you'll get better and better and better. Like that. So like that for now. So what I've done there is just made a little bit of more information, better information around the eyes, and then I'm just going to come in and just using the move tool, I'm just going to start shaping the eyes a little bit. Now I'm going to remind people about the AccuCurve shape. So what I'm going to do is currently just turn off this that quick. So as standard, my move brush is quite a soft shape. You know, it's a soft mound like that, and that's okay for the most part. Sometimes I want to have a very sharp shape with my move brush. So whereas a standard my move brushes fall off is like that, I want that. Okay, my pen's acting weird. So yeah, whereas my normal move brush has a curve like that, I might want a curve like that, a sharper curve to pull sharper areas down. So how I do that is I've actually got my bar already down here, but the proper, the actual original position for it is if I go to brush, actually make sure I got the move brush selected. Oops, a daisy. So move brush. If I go to brush, then curve, I can turn on something called AccuCurve. So now I get a sharper pull. So like I said, it's down here on my custom shelf, so that's a normal curve. If I turn on AccuCurve, that's the shape. You can see the difference the shape makes. Okay. So I'm going to do now is spend a bit of time just shaping the eyes a little bit. Looking at my reference again. Always look at our reference. So let's bring her back. And what kind of shapes have I going on? So I've got a bit of a sharp line here, and then a plateau, and then it's down here. Okay. So make sure that upper lid is dominant. So let's turn on the AccuCurve because I might want to just pull up something sharp about there. Lower eyelid. So you can see what I'm doing is just literally just looking at my reference, and if you've got multiple different angles, especially if you're doing someone with some really nice, a really nice asset pack, or a celebrity who's got a load of pictures, multiple sides, I'm going to try and see what from a profile, what shape does the eyelid make, from the front, what shape does the eyelid make, from a 3/4, kind of see what's going on there. Because the more you do this, and the more you study, and the more you analyze and observe, then the more you'll be able to look at something and almost get it. Well, not almost get a very good idea about what that shape's going to be, without necessarily needing all the additional kind of views. So let me just make the tear duct. And again, I'm looking from underneath, looking over top. I don't want to get any wobbly shapes. So no wobbly shapes, no wobbly shapes. Now they seem a touch bit outside. If I go to there and I transfer, I could probably move the eyes in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just go to my movement tool. Not movement tool, my movement option up the top here, my gizmo, and just move that in a touch to the middle. Now remember, I moved my pivot point off to one side using Alt and just dragging it. And now with the symmetry turned on, if I move one into the middle, the other one's going to follow as well. And the same thing will be for what my eyelids I've just made as well. So make sure they've got symmetry turned on. Move those in slightly. And then the upper eyelid, same jazz. It feels a little bit better. Now things can always get modified again later on. I'm not totally married to anything just yet. Okay. So now that I've got my eyelids in there, I can start to just refine the shape a little bit, truly looking at my reference and seeing what shapes are visible in the upper eyelid section, in the orbital socket area, in the concave area here. You know what's going on with this area here, so I can drag some of that lower eyelid down a little bit to kind of blend it into this area. Okay, and again, just looking around. Okay. Now I've got those in there. Obviously, it looks a bit weird. We should never think that anything's completely ruined or completely, terrible unless it's actually part of the mesh and we're finished with it and we're saying like, right, if I've finished with it or if I'm at a certain point, how does it look? Of course, the eyes are separate at the minute. Of course, the transitional regions between eyelids and stuff hasn't been sculpted yet. It's going to look a little bit funky at first. So I would not worry, because when we combine all these together, that's when we can start to actually, get these things looking properly. And yeah, you can, like I'm doing here, you can go through and make some of that work a bit easy for you by sculpting on the main surface, but really, it's never going to be perfect until the end. Okay? So now that I'm just done that, so I've got my eyeballs, my lower eyelids, and my upper eyelids all into place, just using a very simple but maybe long-winded process. What I can do now is I'm going to merge my lower eyelids into my main mesh. Now I'm going to do that first because they're the subdominant. So when I blend the dominant eyelid, the upper eyelid in there, that's going to make a really nice crease on my lower and upper eyelid. So I really want to maintain this area. So I find my lower eyelid. I'm just going to press this button here on my subtool menu, and it's going to move up and down. So those two to the left and right of that, those two are going to move the selected subtool up and down. And I just want to bring that underneath my head, and then I just I just merge my head down on top of that. So now it looks like my eyes are part of the same mesh, but they're not just yet. They're not been dynameshed. They're still separate meshes. So now I can actually dynamesh in. But before I do that, I need to think about the level of detail I'm now adding. I'm going to be adding a lot more detail. I'm going to need a lot more detail. So what dynamesh resolution am I at the minute? I'm at 500. Don't want to be 500. We'd probably be somewhere around 180 or something like that. 128, something like that. I know I'm going to add a lot more detail here, so I'm actually going to jump up to 250. Okay, so I'm going to add to 250 resolution. It's going to give me a lot more resolution to what I've had so far, and it's going to just allow me to add a bit more information. There we go. So now I can see there that I've actually blended the eyes into the face. They're actually part of the mesh. So now I can actually start sculpting these together. Now this is the point where I have to start being careful as well around the eyes, because my eyes are actually part of the mesh. There is a shape there which I'm liking. I don't want to start going in there and accidentally start sculpting on top of it and stuff. I want to maintain this nice crisp line. Same for the upper eyelid. I'm going to want to maintain the nice crisp line that I've created there. So I've just got to be a bit careful around here, that's all. Now, I don't want to be going in with the move. I don't want any eyes like that. Please don't give me eyes that look like that. No eyes look like this. Eyes have a relatively sharp for the human body, a relatively sharp angle of going from like the pink flesh of the inside to the flesh of the outside. So just touching up a little bit around here. Okay, and then when I'm happy with that, I can do the exact same thing for the upper eyelid. So find my upper eyelid subtool, move that up below my head, which is there, and I'm just going to merge down like that. And if I want to, I could bump up my resolution even higher than this. So I could go to something like 280. But that, I reckon this is like the highest we need to go for now, because we've still got to do the lips and stuff. And really, once I dynamesh this in, like that, this is more than enough information we need to start sculpting in some the sort of information that we at this point need to worry about. Obviously, we're not worrying about anything else but the big details, and this is just enough. Okay, so now my upper eyelid is in there, and again, what I can do is carefully start sculpting around stuff now. So carefully start sculpting. Make sure I've got that lower eyelid in there. So you can see, because of that dynameshing, I have lost the crease a little bit right there. But one thing I don't want to have is just like I don't want to have that where there is no idea about a dominant and a subdominant eyelid. You know, I want to have the idea of that dominant and subdominant. So I can go in there with the trim, not the damn standard a bit if I want to. You know, whatever. And at this point, it's all just about shaping the eye. So pulling out that tear duct. Looking what's happening with the lower eyelid. Has my subject got very puffy eyelids? Have they not? So looking at Veronica here, you can see that there is some kind of shape underneath the eyelid here, because obviously there is an eyeball there, and that's influencing the shape of the lower eyelid. So I think looking at that, if I go in with like a trim dynamic and I keep calling it trim dynamic, damn standard, with a nice low resolution, nice low intensity, I reckon I could just kind of mimic that shape a little bit. Yeah, like that. Now that's a little bit overly sharp, but it's getting the right shape at first, because then I can just, oh well, I shouldn't be using the smooth tool. I can just build that back out slightly, ever so slightly. Now I keep saying we want to stay away from any really sharp lines in the face. Now there are going to be some sharp lines with like creases and stuff, but really there are no really sharp lines in the human face. Now my eyes are there, and then yeah, it's just a case of just building up those forms carefully and slowly. I don't want to have too much crazy information. And like I said, if I feel that my eyes are too far apart, too close together at this point, it's not difficult for me to just go in there, grab a big old move brush, and in fact I could mask off an area. So I can mask off this area here, flip it, and I can just say, right, all this is just going to get pulled in slightly. Not too much, like a few millimeters, and then I can just match up my eyeballs to that. And then any of the obvious issues that have occurred from that, because obviously I've crushed in my nose there, there's a little bit of something there, I just have to go in there and fix it up. Oops a daisy. So a lot of it's just about a lot of the fixing's either big old move brush, or a bit of masking then moving, or masking then sculpting. You know, it's not too much trouble to fix some of this stuff up. And in fact, sometimes moving stuff in like there, yes, I did get that horrible little mark on the inside of my nose, but that's actually given me a, now that I've made my nose thinner, it actually looks a little bit more balanced. Sorry about the very, if you can hear that anyway, very loud noise outside. There we go. Now, for those of you who are getting Swiss cheese in, which is where two parts of mesh are so close together that they'll create, when you dynamesh them, they'll create holes because both sides merge together. One thing I want you to turn on, or while you're sculpting in general, something good to have turned on anyway, for sculpting brushes, let me just turn this off for now. For sculpting brushes is the back face masking. Now again, this is on my custom shelf because I use it a lot. But say like the clay build-up, if you're using that as a very large brush, so if I go to the ear for instance, and I start sculpting from the front like this, what I'm not noticing is from the back it's also starting to drag it in. Because again, if we remember, this circle isn't actually a circle, it's a sphere. That sphere is also interacting with the back of that. So if I'm doing big old sculpting, it's going to pull that through, and then when I dynamesh, it's going to start Swiss cheesing eventually. This doesn't look like it's doing it just yet, because we're working at a high resolution, but it will do eventually. So what I'm going to do is turn on back face masking for my sculpting brushes. So for instance, my clear build-up, if I go to brush, and then in this menu I want to go to auto masking, and then just back face masking. And then what happens there is when I sculpt, when that's turned on, it doesn't touch the back, which is really useful. Because then I can do some really nice fine detail in the front of this relatively thin area, the ear, and it's not going to start intersecting with the back of that. The only time it will is when I start pushing it too far, like that, and it starts to kind of come through. That's the only time that that's an issue. But the back face masking, and this is brush dependent as well, like a lot of these settings. So if I turn it on for my move brush, well no, if I turn it on for my sculpt, for my clay build-up brush, it's only going to be on my clay build-up brush. You can't use back face masking on a move brush, it just stops it working. Now one thing I'll do at this point as well is while I'm working is I'm going to start checking around again. I'm going to start looking from the top, looking from the bottom, looking for any lumpy surfaces, uneven surfaces, because I still do want to have a smooth, relatively smooth surface for my character. And notice as well that I'm not using the actual smooth tool to do any of this. I'm just trying to do this by hand. There will be a point where we can use a smooth brush, but like I keep saying, that's best to be used once you've got a good surface and we're at a high enough resolution that the smoothing won't adjust the actual surface of our mesh. It'll just smooth it. It won't actually affect the surface. So that's the eyes. Now they do take a lot of practice. Eyes are something like lips that I take a lot of time over to make sure that they're good enough. And that's not just the eyelids themselves, it's the surrounding area. So what's going on inside the eye socket area here, what's going on the outside here, what's going up top here. Can I get the flesh looking right and the fat looking right around the eye? So it does take a little bit of time and practice. But that is one way of making the eye. Like I said, as you've watched my other videos, sometimes it's just about building that flesh up. And as long as you can get to this shape, however you want to do it, that's totally fine. There are multiple different ways of making a lot of this stuff. I used to do this method for years until I decided to commit to pretty much working from the same mesh 90% of the time. So I only really need to do what I've just shown you there if I'm being very, very precise. But that's one way of making eyes. Cool. So the next video is going to be lips.